so much, Laurie. It's really, really cool to hear about some of your work in Toledo. And as Kim said, the door hangers are such a creative idea. The backpacks, it's just a great way to get kids into school. So the way we're going to be doing this Q&A, if you have a question, please put it in the question box, which is different than our group chat box. If you have comments about the question or the response, you can put those in the group chat. And my colleague Megan is going to be feeding the questions to our presenters in the group chat. So it looks like we've got a question for Sonika. And I should say, no stupid questions. We really want to, we have the rest of this time, basically the next 15 minutes to use this as conversation to answer your questions. We've got some great experts here, so please put in your questions. So here's our question for Sonika. Is there a timetable you would recommend for distributing the brochure? And part two of that is, are there promising practices for its use that you have determined? That's a great question. So turning that question over to Sonika.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the question. So regarding the first one, is there a timetable you would recommend for distributing the brochure? I will say that this is a relatively new resource, so it's hard for me to put an explicit timetable on it. But based on kind of my experience with working with other schools and districts and researchers, I would recommend some of the timestamps that were listed in my presentation. So with at the beginning of the year, right? So there's opportunities to be proactive. So if there are materials that are being sent out to parents, this might be something to add to those materials. Alternatively, any intersection point that you might have with a parent. So this includes with report cards, during parent-teacher conferences, and then making them kind of just peripherally available. So if parents find them, then they can be responsive or build a connection directly with the school or district. So there are kind of, those places would be, again, like on the website or in main offices, places where they might find them on their own. Alternatively, I mean, other time points, there's no real bad time point, I would say, right? Intervention can happen at any point. And getting a conversation started with a parent at any time during the school year is probably going to be appreciated. But if you're going to prioritize the time, I would say at the beginning of the school year, so you can start initiating conversation and start developing rapport and a relationship with those parents. Regarding the second question, let me scroll back up to it. One second. Are there promising practices for its use that you have determined? So that one is going to be a bit hard to answer just because this is a newly developed resource, and so we really haven't received, and honestly, we've just launched it on the website, so we haven't really had a chance to hear back from others about promising practices. But I definitely encourage folks on this call that if you do hear or end up using it and do find use, please do reach out to us. We'd love to hear how it's being used and to incorporate that in kind of messaging to other folks about how this tool can be effectively used.
Great. Thank you, Sonika. Looks like we've got lots of questions coming in. This next one that Megan gave is to Monty. How should schools and districts be engaging in one-way versus two-way communication? So how do you determine if you do one-way, how often do you do one-way versus two-way? So a little bit more information about those two strategies would be great.
No problem, and thank you for the question. I think with regard to engaging in one-way communication, I would say since that's most likely the easiest form because it doesn't require as much energy, that should be completed more often than not. And start as early as you can. As you mentioned, my colleagues talked about doing the community walk and handing out backpacks before school even started. That just gave me feels. it made me want to go to the school. So as much as you can, do the one-way communication often. I think the two-way communication would be a little bit more timely, only because you do have to be mindful of parent schedules. So I do see that one happening less, even though it is preferable, but only because it involves organizing your time around parent schedules. When to do it? For early warning systems, we do recommend that teams review data at certain time periods in the school year. Consider structuring a two-way parent communication around those times as well when you know you are implementing supports for your particular students. So I think that would be a very beneficial way to develop strategies to engage parents, because at that point in time when you're reviewing data, you're already looking at the student progress earlier on, at the beginning of the school year, at the start of the school year, and at the end of the school year. So those are my suggestions.
Great. Thank you, Monty. We've got a couple of good questions here for Laurie. Community walks and door hangers are a great idea. How did you get that started? Who leads the charge? And then Julie had a follow-up question to that. Who funded these book bags and supplies? So, Laurie, it sounds like we really love that door hanger and backpack idea. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so really we are in the process right now. We had a principal who we just had a principal change. Our principal has just moved up to the district level. However, her name is Treva Jeffries, and she was a graduate of our high school. She taught here at Scott and then also became the principal here at Scott. And last year her daughter graduated from Scott. And so she's been in this community her entire life. And really, she has led the charge on doing the community walks and getting that entire initiative started. She's definitely a good cheerleader for reaching out to the community and making sure that we're visible in the community and that we're portraying a very good image in the community. So that would definitely be how we got started. Now, the question about the funding becomes a little tricky. When we first started the community walks, we had a school improvement grant, and that is one of the things that we used some of that money to fund. Of course, that money is no longer available, and so I have to say I don't know how we've been funding it since then. But I think we just always find a way to make it happen. But Julie, I will definitely look into finding out how we funded it for this year and pass that along to you and to the other data coordinators and EWS champions in the district.
Great. Thanks, Laurie. Cool to hear that story. So I'm going to skip down to this question for all presenters, and I know we haven't heard from Lacey, so I'm going to see if Lacey wants to respond to this one, and maybe if not, Laurie. So the question is, what kind of PD or coaching opportunities do teachers or school staff get for having difficult conversations with parents? So Lacey, I know you work nationally. Do you see any PD opportunities or trainings for school staff when they have these difficult conversations? If so, great, we want to hear about it. If not, we'd be curious, Laurie, if you do any training for your staff. So first I'll pass it to Lacey.
Yeah, so there is professional development and training for kind of having these conversations with parents, and really it's very focused on cultural competency and addressing cultural differences oftentimes. So we do see trainings that really help educators, and this is especially for educators that are working with student and family populations that are different than their own, trainings that help them go in and understand the cultures of the families they're working with, their communication styles, their perceptions about education and their own culture. And so it's really around cultural competency and helping those educators really understand that context and then how to address those needs. And so there's a number of programs out there. So whether it's about different racial or cultural differences. There's also a number of trainings around working with families of poverty, and it's really trying to place those educators into that context so they can understand the issues that the families are dealing with. Laurie, did you have any information on those?
Well, it's really an interesting question, and we haven't, since I've been here at Scott, had any training that I would say was specifically geared toward having conversations with parents, but yet on the other hand, we have participated in book studies together that definitely focus in on cultural differences. We also have a culturally diverse staff, so I think when we have conversations with each other, those kinds of topics come up. But I really would be interested in learning more about particular PD that would deal with giving the staff some really good just stepping stones and foundation on how to have those conversations. Our staff has changed a little bit over the last few years, and that's something that is now going to be on my to-do list.
Great. Thanks, Laurie. Monty here in Chicago wanted to add to that.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up and then also look at the question for how do you practice communication as a staff. Very much role-playing is good. And always seek advice. And it's okay to ask for support and help from your colleagues on how to better communicate with parents. And sometimes even communicating amongst staff is crucial as well in order to get the message out to the parents that you serve. So just make sure that it's at least an open communication and it's a safe space to have that conversation and that practice. When you're looking for examples of training, I'm not going to specifically give an example of a training institute, but what I would recommend is that whatever training that you do come across, make sure it's holistic and it will actually provide you that opportunity to practice those difficult conversations, practice how to develop communication visually, and also from a written perspective as well. So just make sure whatever training that you do find, it covers at least all those three forms of communication, so then you can be better prepared to develop a product that meets the needs of your parents.
Great. All right, we've got a question for Lacey I'm going to go back up to. And just as a reminder, we do have another 5 minutes for Q&A, so keep those questions coming. You can put them in the Q&A box at the top right of your screen, and Megan will feed them to our presenters here. So this question for Lacey, do you have any suggestions for communicating with parents whose first language is not English and or are new to the U.S. and our wonderfully complex education system?
Thanks, Megan. So yes, and I think the first thing here when thinking about working with these families is getting them to feel comfortable in communicating with educators and being at the school and engaging with teachers. So once you get to a place where these families are comfortable with that, they're going to really reach out and help address those barriers with you. But really, I think our strongest suggestion for working with these families where English may be their second language or they've not had any experience with the U.S. educational system is to find a parent leader or a parent ambassador. So someone from that parent community, someone from that same culture or neighborhood that is in tune with working with the school and the teachers, and that you can use as a leader, a parent mentor, or a parent ambassador to then go out and communicate on your behalf with those families. Because if they hear those communications coming from one of their own, someone they consider part of their own group, it's going to be really well received, they're going to be more comfortable, and that can be kind of the priming the pump to getting them to feel comfortable and understand how to work with the school when they see this strong leadership example, and that person can continue to act as a broker for you with those families. So that would be my primary suggestion.
Great. Thanks, Lacey. And thanks, Kim. I see your comment about how your Parent Center developed several PD opportunities as part of a grant. Oh, that's interesting. So for those of you on the webinars, you can think about maybe getting some grant funding for these kinds of trainings. All right, we've got some time left. Please enter any more questions you have. I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to answer any more questions, or to put those more questions in there. If we don't get any more questions, we can wrap up. So take a few minutes to think about any questions you might have. All right, all of our questions have been answered apparently. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. To wrap up, we have a survey that we really would love everyone to take. This survey helps us improve our events and webinars for the future, so we really appreciate it to fill out the survey. Megan just put that survey link in the chat box. We will also follow up with an email thanking you for joining us, and the survey link will be included there. Megan just told me we have one more question, so let's see what that question is before we leave.
Has any advice for reaching parents who are not as accessible?
Any advice for reaching parents who are not as accessible? So any of our presenters who would like to take on that question?
This is Laurie from Toledo, and I will say what I do sometimes. I don't know if it will help anyone, but sometimes I just have a kid ask them if they have their phone with them, and then just say, well, you know, can you call your mom right now? And a lot of times, even if parents have not provided a usable address or phone number to the school, their kids know how to get a hold of them. So just ask the student, and then they'll get their parent on the phone, and then just hand it, say, okay, my teacher has a question for you, you know, and they hand the phone over, and then you start the communication and see if you can get a good number and go from there.
Laurie, here in Chicago, all of us are saying that is so awesome. That is a wonderful strategy. You can't go wrong with that, because when a kid's communicating with their parent, they want to be accessible. So great. That's a great tool.
Thanks.
All right. Well, as I said before, please take our survey. It's in the chat box here and also will be emailed to you. Also, we encourage you to get in touch with us. We have posted our email addresses here, all the presenters, and me, Sarah Rand, your moderator. Please feel free to get in touch with us with any questions. And we really appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you all so much.